Hey guys, thanks for joining Tony and Tyson again. If you don't know who Tyson is, he's my dog. He's always in the background. You may hear him crunching on some kibbles. It is 8:53 on October 22nd, 2019. This is the second recording of the day. If you did hear the first recording called the saddest or a day in sadness, obviously it was coming from a sad and depressed place, but I'm feeling a little bit better right now. It's funny how your mood can change once you actually do something. And I want to say that there's parts of this podcast that I think will be a little more controversial than others. And I really hope that it doesn't take away from the main the main goal of this podcast. So what I'm trying to say is that I might go on a few rants and I might be a little opinionated on some topics. And during these ones, I'm definitely going to put it in a separate group. I'm going to be drinking and I'm going to be smoking both weed and cigarettes when I do these. Well, not cigarettes because I hope we've done that in about 2 weeks. But they're going to be a little more intense than the other ones, I would say. So what I want to talk about right now is something pretty simple because this is the beginning of the podcast and I don't want to kind of overwhelm everybody with my personality and my opinions. But I think this is really important. Excuse me, I'm going to light up a cigarette here, so give me 2 seconds. I think one of the things that we all need to know about, discuss, tell other people about, show other people, get on video, get into our education system, tell politicians, tell anybody you can, is what anxiety is, right? So you can go online and you can look up anxiety and it'll pretty much give you 2 bullet points: social anxiety and generalized anxiety. And it'll tell you exactly what those mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my opinion on what they are. I've felt both, and I have felt both to the point where I've been able to function. And when I mean I'm unable to function, I really mean that I'm in bed and I'm shaking. I have this little tick where when I wake up anxious, I rub my right foot over my left foot. And sometimes my anxiety would be so bad that I'll actually cause a little sore on the end of my left foot because I'll be rubbing it so bad. Now that, in my opinion, is generalized anxiety. Now, I think I probably have a little bit of undiagnosed OCD, and I didn't know until today, and I said this in my other recording, that I did not know that OCD can be internalized. We think of OCD as people who constantly wash their hands and, are afraid of germs or afraid of this or have to lock the door 17 times or, touch their shoulder, blah, 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 one of those things. But it can also be internalized. So they have the same thought over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. This, I would say, is generalized anxiety. Generalized anxiety, I think, is more physical than it is mental. If anybody's ever had a panic attack, they probably are experiencing social anxiety. So I've also had social anxiety. When I was 25, I had my first real panic attack. And it was a horrifying experience. My anxiety was so bad that, first of all, I find that social anxiety, you feel the same symptoms that you do with generalized anxiety, but you also have the mental anxiety that goes along with being trapped in a place that you absolutely do not want to be, both physically and mentally. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're going to like a little house gathering, right? And you don't know very many people. Maybe even you do know most of the people, and you just don't want to be there. I mean, everybody knows the story of one of the best feelings on earth is having plans and then getting out of them. You have a party that you have to go to, or you have something you have to go to, and your friends are like, oh, they're so excited to go, and you just really don't want to go, but kind of internally you do, but you don't. And then you say, oh no, I can't do it. You make up some weird excuse, and then you're like, oh yeah, like almost like it's a shot of heroin or something like that. And you just feel so relaxed, and you're in your bed and you're like, oh God, yeah, you turn on Netflix and then you just fall asleep. That's not good. All right. Let's get that through our thick heads right now, that's not good. We should be able to tell our friends, listen, I'm feeling anxious. I want to come, but I don't want to come. That's what she said. And they have to know how to respond to that. And that's why I'm making this podcast. Okay? Because we don't have that dichotomy right now. We are unable to have that discussion openly, as far as I'm concerned, right now, especially with work as well. One of the goals that I would like to have in this podcast is to bring awareness of what anxiety and depression is, and PTSD and all the rest of them, but anxiety and depression are the ones that I suffer from the most, to the forefront of discussion. So one of my goals is this. So I've been a waiter for a long time, and I've also been a teacher for a short time. But when I was a waiter, yes, it was a fantastic job. I really enjoyed it when I was young, but it takes its toll on you. The lifestyle is very tough. You're making a lot of money in terms of cash, and the world that you live in is very kind of incestuous and diluted, and it can really take its toll on you. You're doing a lot of drugs, you're drinking a lot of alcohol, you're having wine tastings for your restaurant, you always have cash afterwards, everyone wants to have a drink afterwards, so you're not living a very healthy lifestyle. You're not eating correctly, you're probably walking 12 to 15,000 steps a day without proper exercise, and you feel burnt out a lot of the time. But you can't call in sick. So one of my big things is when I finally got burnt out with serving, there was days, so I was serving 5 days a week, and I finally got burnt out, and I didn't have the ability to call into work and say, listen, I'm burnt. I can't do it. I woke up shaking. I can't do it. I'd be in tears, blah, blah, blah. So I'd make up some horrible excuse. My second grandmother on my father's side died of fucking whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is. You make up some bogus lie, and you take the day off, and you'd be sitting there thinking to yourself, well, I got to take this day off to feel better, but you're not feeling any better because you just lied. Well, wouldn't it be so much better if everyone just understood what anxiety was? Imagine you had a boss, right, that listened to this podcast. They themselves had anxiety. You didn't even know it because they're struggling as well. But you had a boss that you were able to call in, and it was your shift at 5 o'clock, and you called in at about 3 o'clock, and you said, listen, I'm feeling a ton of anxiety right now, Tony. I'm the boss, okay? And I'd be like, okay, listen, I know how you feel. Why don't you come in, sit at the bar, have a drink, have a tea, have a coffee, have whatever. We'll see how busy we are. If we don't need you, then we'll cut you. But at least try and come in. Maybe we can even talk. We can sit in the office and just talk about it, right? We'll see how you are. Could you imagine how much different life would be if we had that simple conversation? Just that one simple conversation. If you just called in and said, listen, I'm having a horrible fucking day. I can't come in. But there seems to be this weird, even though mental health issues are pretty much at the forefront of every conversation, are still seen as being weak. There are people, hold on one second. There are people who take pride in manning up, pushing through it, sucking it up, working through it. That's not right. We have developed a society, and I mean, this is a 10-hour long conversation. We have developed a society where we are constantly striving to be the best, the brightest, the strongest, blah, 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 blah. Well, we have burnt ourselves out as a society. We are focusing on the wrong things. And I know I'm going to go off on a tangent here, so hopefully I get back onto anxiety. But could you imagine if we were able to have that one conversation with our bosses? Now, there are countries out there, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Germany, most of those countries up in Scandinavia, where you have 6 weeks off no matter what. Doesn't matter if you work in Quickie or you work as a CEO of whatever, you have 6 weeks off. Most of the CEOs and that don't take it, but you have 6 weeks off. So all you have to do is call in and be like, hey, I'm taking my day off. That's it, right? So why are we still stuck in this place in Canada where we can't call in and be like, listen, I need a day? Even when I was teaching, I know people who felt scared to call in and say, listen, you have a certain amount of days in teaching where you could just call in a number. You don't even have to talk to anybody, just call in a number and press a button and you don't have to go in. And let me tell you, you talk about hitting a morphine button, that's a goddamn morphine button right there, right? But the next day, you'd be asked by your principal or your vice principal, well, why'd you take the day off? Well, should I have to answer that? What if I do answer it? What if I do say, well, you know what? I was just burnt out. And let me tell you, if you're teaching kindergarten to grade 3, you're going to be burnt out a lot of the time. A lot of the time, because looking after kids, especially other people's kids, is a burning out process. That's how you get burnt out. Excuse me for a second, I'm just taking a drink. When I was I'll tell you a story. When I was in teachers college, I was I was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, which means that there's two types of bipolar disorder: bipolar type 1, bipolar type 2, and actually there's a third. It's called cyclothymia. So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 2, and at the time it made sense. I was still in the kind of height of my addiction, my gambling addiction, and a lot of that addiction was contributing to my mental health issues. So I was constantly feeling up and down. So when I was in teachers college, I've always kind of looked for a mentor as well. I never been able to foster that relationship, but I remember I fostered kind of that relationship with one of my professors in teachers college, and so I felt comfortable enough to tell her that I was bipolar, because I think I'd missed 2 classes, which is a lot in teachers college for one class. I missed 2 classes, and I said, listen, I have bipolar disorder, and I was just in a bad place. I always did my homework, always did well in school. I've always been lucky that way. And she took me aside. She said, listen, Tony, we've developed this relationship. She I don't know if she is a principal now, but she was a principal at the time. She said, listen, do not tell anybody about that. And I was flabbergasted. I think that was the first day where I really felt hurt. I really felt different. And I was like, why? And she's like, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, but people will not see it the way that I see it or the way that you see it. They'll see it as somebody who's unstable. And for me, teaching was a way to be stable. Being in school was a way to be stable. If you took away the addiction part, I wouldn't have missed those 2 days, right? In my outside life, I still might have those ups and downs, but when I'm teaching, always very calm, always the best with the kids. Love the kids. I've always had compliments from parents, other teachers, blah, 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 blah. And like the kids themselves, which I take a lot of pride in. But when she told me not to tell anybody that, I was like, wait a second here. We're teaching our kids about mental health. We're teaching our kids to be more accepting of mental health, but yet we're not acting out what we're teaching. How the fuck is that possible? How are we supposed to make any change whatsoever if we're not acting out what we're teaching? I was shocked. I was hurt. I remember I went home. I was sad because I like to be able to tell people that. Subsequently, I was re-diagnosed with unipolar depression, which is much different than bipolar. Anybody who has bipolar out there, if you've had a manic episode, yes, it can be very daunting, especially if you're in a role where you're looking after somebody else's kids. But I have met teachers who have bipolar type 1, which is one of the most aggressive and hardest types of bipolar to treat. That's where you're facing mania more than you're facing depression. And let me tell you, if you've ever felt a manic stage, or if you've ever seen anybody in a manic stage, the line between being in psychosis and being in mania is very, very thin. Very thin. So of course, a principal or another teacher or a parent does not want to have somebody who has bipolar type 1 or has any chance of being manic teaching their kid. But let me tell you something. You can get psychosis, or you can get mania through many different avenues other than just being bipolar. So that's what really hurt me, right? Number 2, we can't always be judged based on a label, right? It's like, don't judge a book by its cover. When I saw the cover of not To Kill a Mockingbird, what's the one with the little pussy there? Oh my God, the kid. Catcher in the Rye. It was just a brown cover that said Catcher in the Rye. I was like, I don't know, 13 years old, 12 years old. I didn't know what this book was. My teacher was like, oh, it's great. It's fantastic. I was like, yeah, it's fucking got a brown cover, whatever. Of course it's amazing. It's one of the best books of all time. And yeah, It's got some bad points. It's still banned in some states in the United States. You American fuckers are crazy. I'll tell you that much right now. But the point is that with the risk of it being a little bit bad, there is so much depth and greatness in there that it makes it absolutely worth the risk. Okay, so let's get back to anxiety. Generalized anxiety, give me 1 second here. Generalized anxiety, to me, seems to be more about the physical than the mental. So generalized anxiety is that when you feel the cortisol running through your body. If you don't know what cortisol is, it's the stress hormone, right? So you wake up kind of on edge. You wake up like you've already had a coffee. You haven't slept well. Your eyes kind of dart around like you've had too much coffee. What else? You kind of have those recurring thoughts. They could be good or they could be bad, but you have those recurring thoughts over and over and over again. It's almost like you're not really there, but you're there. You can handle it. But generalized anxiety, when it gets bad, you really can't handle it. That's when you burn out. Now, social anxiety, I always equate to panic attacks. So you're in a social setting and you feel like you're going to die. And if anybody's had a panic attack, you know exactly what I mean. Your eyes start to go blurry. You think you're going to throw up. You think you're going to pass out. Your heart starts to race. You start sweating like a motherfucker. And you say to yourself, oh my God, this is the time I'm actually going to die. And the irony of it all, and kind of you have to laugh at it a bit, is that you felt it so many times, but you're unable to say to yourself, okay, I felt this a million times. Why don't I just take a couple breaths and settle down? But you can't. You absolutely can't. And if you're in the wrong social situation, you fucking freak out. I have freaked out. I've been in the middle of a Rush concert. I know, take your shots at me. Rush is amazing. I love it. I was in the middle of a Rush concert, and I had a full-on panic attack, and I made my way to the side, hopped over a fence, and literally walked home shaking. There was another time where I was at Carleton. I was taking antibiotics for, and so this is what I mean. There are other things that can contribute to mental health issues here. I was taking antibiotics prescribed for strep throat, and there was so much strep throat in Ottawa at the time. This was a long time ago, that they ran out of amoxicillin, which is a pretty light antibiotic. So unfortunately, they give me this stuff called clamithoricin or something like that. It was a really, really intense antibiotic. And if you've ever taken antibiotics, never drink on them. Just take them, buckle down for the 10 days and take probiotics and drink a lot of water. But anyways, I didn't know at that time. But I was there actually taking an educational evaluation with my worker. And I started to feel that pressure, that I started to feel that tingle. My eyes started to go. I started to sweat. And my proctor, whoever was running the exam, goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I have to go." And I literally ran out of the room. I ran to the bathroom, and I ran the sink water, because that's always been very soothing for me. That's one of my things, is I'll go to the bathroom and I'll either run the tap or I'll run the shower. So I ran the tap, and I was splashing water in my face, and I actually laid down on this public bathroom. Luckily, it was one of those where it was a kind of a handicap washroom where you could lock it. And I laid down on this, it's old marble floor, and I have a wet kind of napkin in my head, and I'm just wiping my head, and I'm just getting to the point where I can just function, because at that point I didn't have clonazepam, or I didn't have Xanax, or I didn't have lorazepam on me to take care of that. So I'm thinking to myself, holy fuck, how the hell am I going to get home? I'm a young student. I didn't have any money to take a cab. Even if I did have money to take a cab, I couldn't deal with being in a cab. The only way I could get home was taking the O train or taking a bus, and I couldn't fucking very well get on a bus. So after about 20 minutes, I finally got to a point physically where I felt safe leaving, and got up and walked home. And it must have been 5K. But I'm telling you right now that 5K was the worst and the scariest 5K I've ever walked in my entire life. I definitely thought I was going to die. There was 2 times where I had to lay down on the grass and just breathe. And I really thought I was going to die. So, and hopefully people could relate to this. And if you do, please leave your comments. Tell me that you agree. Tell me that you disagree. Tell me you don't know what this is. Tell me that you do know. Tell me that you felt this before. Tell me something. But anxiety is the goddamn worst. Now, I'll end this little podcast or this little recording by saying this. The one thing that did help me get through anxiety, and I've seen it with somebody else who's an ex-girlfriend, was medication. Now, while my end goal in my life is to get off all medication, at that time and at this time, I could not function without an SSRI. Now, that being said, and also a benzodiazepine when I needed it. That being said, that's not for everybody. Exercise obviously helps, diet definitely helps, and laying off drugs and alcohol definitely helps. That goes without question. But taking an SSRI or an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety pill, it helped. It was a definite Band-Aid with some polysporum on that kind of wound that existed as anxiety. So if anybody out there is feeling that pressure of constant anxiety and you're scared or embarrassed to take medication, I'm telling you, it's worth looking into. You can leave a comment, or I'll somehow set up an email so you can talk to me about it. But I implore you to talk to your doctor. It doesn't mean you have to be on the medication forever. Trust me, there's somebody in my family, I won't name who they are, never had anxiety in their life until something major happened in their life, and had to take medication for 2 years and then got off it and are perfectly fine. And also the stigma of taking medication, we're going to talk about that soon too as well. Anyways, guys, I love to hear your comments. I love the fact that I'm able to talk about this stuff, and I love the fact that I know people are listening to it. So please give me a thumbs up, subscribe, like the button. I don't really do it for that, to be quite honest with you, but it helps get this video out there. Anyways, I'm going to sign off. Tony and Tyson. I know there's no video, but Tyson's right behind me. Over and out. Take care. Bye-bye.